So I'm going to go over 9 trends that I feel are what most people call mostly hard trends. These are things that I think are actually going to happen. You can bank on it. And I'm going to try and do things that are more of a global perspective as opposed to the actual content perspective. So next slide, please. Actually, back up for a second. I wanted to say that my clients right now primarily are Venture DNA, which does mobile strategy and mobile apps, or Media Group, which is doing Chinese co-productions with Chinese financing, and the Institute, which is a branded content company. It's one of Michael Bay's production companies. Next slide. So my first trend, which is really obvious, I don't even have to say it anymore, is gamification. And the next slide, you'll see a couple of examples of that. And this just means that almost anything you can do in content, there's going to be more game elements added to it. Badges, levels, rewards, point systems. So you see it in Foursquare, you see it in Loop, you see it in Groupon. My analogy is green stamps. People like to collect little incentives. It's just a habitual state of mind. You even see games being added to corporate enterprise software to incentivize people to do things, to be on time, to have better quality control. A good example of gamification, which I think is subtle, is the reviewer badges on Amazon. So if you go on Amazon, people that have the best reviews, you can go back a second, you can see people that have these badges, which give them rewards for being the most usable reviews on Amazon. So even Amazon gives you social equity for having good reviews. Next slide, please. The other thing you can say for sure is that mobile connected internet devices will become ubiquitous all over the world. Next slide. The number that is going to be so prevalent is because of the chipsets. These chipsets are coming down so low in price and so high in quality, they can be embedded in almost everything. On the right, you see the chipset for HSDPA, which is the wireless broadband standard in most of Asia, by Huawei. Huawei is the largest manufacturer of telecommunications embedded systems in the world, so much so that it was deemed a security risk by the U.S. government. And they wanted that Huawei chipset to be investigated because they're being embedded in so many devices. Next to it is the Ericsson chipset, which is used in the LTE devices or 4G devices. So because of these, you go to the next slide to see the trend. 15 billion connected devices by 2015 is Intel's number. That's everything. Refrigerators, cars, tanks, bazookas, grenade launchers, and of course smartphones. Next slide is another number from Ericsson. In 10 years, the CEO of Ericsson estimates there'll be 50 billion internet connected devices. So you can bank on this. Next slide, please. Of course, the one that is most prevalent and the most relevant to our discussion is smartphones, with different standardized platforms. iPhone, of course, being the one that's become most prevalent, but Android is catching it fast. And for the first time in history, this quarter, the smartphones, fourth quarter of 2010 and this quarter of 2011, smartphones outsold PCs. Next slide, please. 350,000 new Android activations per day. This is information I got yesterday at a webinar given by Google. This is really fresh stats from the Google piece. 50% of the U.S. subscribers of phones are now smartphones. People that have smartphones use the web 50 times more than if you have just a feature phone, which is kind of obvious because you can't do much with a feature phone. Next slide. App Store. There's an app economy. So the app economy is going to grow to about $8 billion by 2014. So all of these are indicative of the hard trend that you can bank on in this mobility. Next slide. The other trend that goes along with this is a global phenomenon. So all of us have to think globally. Now, you don't necessarily have to be a global company, and you may do things that are very localized and not worry about the global economy. But if you want to scale, you have to think globally because of uneven growth around the world. And the next slide, you see the idea that almost anywhere you go in the world, in developing countries where there's no sanitation, in fact, there's no running water or electricity, there are now mobile phone devices. Next slide is the picture of a group in Zambia that sell mobile phone services through MTN. And MTN is a South African company that is concentrating on the developing world. And they go in and they create infrastructure so that you can have wireless devices. So first they have to build power plants and towers, and then they can start selling very low-cost feature phones. Next slide. The growth is uneven. This is the PricewaterhouseCoopers summary of their yearly analysis of the entertainment and media space, which is really good for all the stats and the economics. And the key point here is that Asia, in the 2011 to 2013 tranche, has a 6.5% compound annual growth rate. North America is negative and is slowly climbing out of it until it flattens out. So essentially what it's saying is North America is saturated. There is not that much growth in the media entertainment space. It's a zero-sum game. There's some decreases, there's some increases. The pie is going to be resliced a million times, but it's flat. All the growth is ex-US, mostly in Asia, also in Middle East and Africa. Next slide. Next trend is that the tablets, which have been mentioned a few times already, are eclipsing the readers, the laptops, and other platforms incredibly quickly. And you see in the next slide some of the basic numbers that show that in 2010 there are 18 million tablets sold, about 90% of those are iPads. This year, there'll be between, depending on which one you read, which statistic you read, 45 to 60 million tablets will be sold this year. It's really incredible. It wasn't even a category 2 years ago. About 80% of these will be Apple iPads. So they are by far the dominant market leader. That's compared to 12 million of the e-book readers, which are the Nooks and the Kindles and so forth. So the tablets have eclipsed the readers. That's pretty clear. It is really something you have to focus on as a major platform. Hard trend. Next slide. There were over 90 new tablet devices introduced at CES this year. 90. Now, most of them may not see the light of day, or they only sell in very small quantities.